Hello, everybody. It's Chloe Verse here, and today I'm doing the mid-year book Freakout tag. Is it late in the year to be doing this? Yes, I've had this scripted since June, and I honestly couldn't tell you what happened, why I haven't filmed it. Actually, I could. An assortment of tech issues, and also I've just been enjoying the summer, enjoying the weather, enjoying my family, enjoying my friends. So, BookTube has definitely taken a back seat this season. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is I actually did try to film the video on earlier this week, and I'd mentioned earlier that I was having iMovie issues, like it was closing, so I couldn't edit stuff, and I had to update my operating system when I was like looking for different streaming options, and I thought maybe that would fix it, just because like I don't really do updates on my computer, and I was like maybe it's just outdated, and that's what's causing the issue. And I sat down. It didn't close down. So it's like, oh, good sign. Filmed the video on iMovie. And then once I went to look for the actual footage, nowhere to be found on my computer. I checked my storage and like there is no like sign that is saved anywhere on my computer. Like I have the same amount of storage as I did before I filmed the video. So um looks like I just can't rely on filming on my laptop anymore, which is annoying, but I will figure out a workaround. Hopefully I can still edit in iMovie once I get the footage done, but if not, again, I might have to do a workaround for that. Because I would like to do more standalone reviews, and those are like the one video where I'm like, I can't do this live. Like, I absolutely want to have this pre-recorded and edited. So that's a long backstory to this. The creators of this tag are listed in the description box below, so check them out, subscribe, give love to their content, and let's get into the meat of the video. So, best book you've read so far. So, unfortunately, at the time that I had scripted up this video, I did not have any five-star reads. And that's not really the fault of any of the books that I've been reading, truthfully. I've just been checked out from reading. I don't know what it is, but I will like read a book where I'm like, craft-wise, I very much appreciate what's going on thematically and like analytically. I know that this is doing things that like any other time of the year I would be all over. Like this would be like really like pulling at my heart. And for whatever reason, I'm reading it and I'm just like, I don't feel a thing. And for me, five-star reads are, a book that made me feel a lot. So that's disappointing, but not the fault of anything that I'm reading at this time. Um, so right now, the favorite book I've read so far is going to be Artie and the Wolf Moon by Olivia Stevens. I talked about this a little bit already in my interview with the author that I did last week, but I thought the art was very dynamic. There's a lot of fun twists on vampire and werewolf lore here. There's a family-based plot that I really enjoyed. This is a middle grade werewolf graphic novel, and I'm an adult who reads middle grade. Not super frequently, but like I don't have an issue buying it for myself or getting it from the library, and I enjoyed it. If I had cousins who were in this age range, I'd pass it on to them, but I don't really. Hey, Alicia, thanks for stopping by. And then, is there anything else to say about this book and why I liked it? No, I would just say check out my interview with the author because she had so many insights into like her creative process and stuff like that that like I hadn't even thought about. Like specifically elusive ancestry being like tied to like supernatural and paranormal stuff. And I just think that's a great interview, and I encourage you to go watch it if you haven't seen it already. So, next question is best sequel you've read so far. And for that, I would say Redemptor by Jordan E. Fuego. This category, it's like it's always like I read one sequel. I read one sequel a year, and so it's just gonna go to the one sequel I read because I'm not really big on series as a reader. Um, so in terms of Redemptor, despite it winning by default, how did it do as a sequel? I think that in tone and like feel, it is very different from Raybearer, the book that came before, and not necessarily in a way that I liked. I felt like Raybearer's strengths were the connection to the characters, um, like the focus on relationships in the story, and like the pace to me felt, I wouldn't say leisurely, but it felt like we got time to appreciate like small moments along the way. And this book was a lot faster. There's a lot of subplots. I felt like it rushed a lot of things that was a shame because I felt like if Fueko didn't get to like flex as much as she could have if she had maybe broken this up into 2 books, maybe ditched some side plots. But I do think that one thing that is very consistent between these 2 books is that Fueko's descriptions of landscapes, of cultures is like top notch. Like the details in how people dress and the music they listen to and how they dance. It's always very strong, I think, in her writing. And always makes the world feel like very big and lush and like makes you excited to explore it. Um, so that is why I would pick Redemptor by Jordan Fueko for best sequel. Hey Lois, thanks for popping in. Lois says, I'd love to read Redemptor, but it's been so long since I've read Raybear, I'd have to reread that one again. That's fair. I am like, when I want to read, when I do a series read and I haven't read the first one in a while, I just go back in and I'm like, I'm just going to forget stuff. It's going to be what it's going to be. I don't have time to possibly revisit one or more books to get to the book that I actually want to read. I am, I guess, chaotic in that way. Hey T, thanks for joining. Next question is new release you haven't read yet but want to. Hey Sarah. And that release would be a middle grade mermaid story, A Comb of Wishes by Lisa Stringfellow. This was one I was really, really looking forward to. It's a middle grade mermaid fantasy. And I was just like very intrigued by this cover. I'd heard good things from Bina, Miss WC reader who had read it, but it just like always slips my mind to request it at the library. It's been out since like February. So maybe I'll make a point to request it this week. Probably, probably not though. Truthfully, I just set so many book related goals for this year that I'm just not going to accomplish. I didn't really make a plan to accomplish them. And then I just had like life things, both good and bad, that I had to attend to, that like reading wasn't really a focus. So I feel like this is one of those things where I'm just going to be like, I want to do this. I couldn't do it. Maybe next year. So next question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And that, I would say, is House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. I've been really not staying on top of new releases. Like, I'd say in the past, like maybe 2 years, I've been very focused on like getting advanced reader copies. And so I was just really on top of like, okay, what's coming out when? What are the ones I'm really excited to read? And like this question, I really had to like go through my Goodreads to figure out what exactly it was even coming out this year. Like I really only knew like 5 books off the top of my head. And they weren't even necessarily like titles I was like planning to read right away. But I remembered this one by Alexis Henderson, House of Hunger. So I don't remember the age range for this one. I think it's going to be adult with like young adult crossover, similar to her debut, Year of the Witching. I really, really liked Year of the Witching. I thought the writing was fantastic. There's a lot of like small, like gory, spooky details that were just described in like really fun ways, really memorable ways. And I loved the like foreboding, grim atmosphere. I like the pacing. I just really, really enjoyed that book. And so I'm excited to see what happens in this one. The Year of the Witching was supposed to get a sequel, but Henderson has said that that may or may not happen. So this book is set in a completely different world. The setup for the story is that it's like this fantasy world where for whatever reason, like rich people are like paying to drink blood. It's just fun for them for some reason. And so they're like these like houses set up where people are supposed to just like laying around, enjoying life, drinking blood. And like people who live there are there are like tenants who live there who are donating their blood. to be served fresh because, whatever the farm to table version of blood is, I guess this is it. Um, and the pay is like pretty good. It's like pretty hard to turn away. So there's this like young woman from the country who like moves into the big city and she gets this job, and it's about like all the debauchery and horror that she encounters in this house that she moves into. I People probably haven't heard of this short story, Divine in the House of Hunger by Darius Followed, but I feel like thematically, it's going to make me feel very similar to that story. Like there are similar things going on with like talking about exploitation of like young workers, especially like inexperienced or naive workers, and like rich people like actually like consuming poor people, like in a literal way. I think it just like made me think of that short. So I'm interested to see what happens in this one. Because Year of the Witching was disgusting. I'm sure this one's gonna be disgusting too. I'm gonna take a look at the comments real quick to see what people are saying. Alicia says, love the cover for Coma Wishes. And then Lois said, House Hunger sounds like a great Halloween read. It's gonna be out just in time for Halloween. Just in time for Halloween, if you're in the US at least. Because the release, I think, is like September 27th, 29th. It's supposed to be releasing in late September. So, you can order it. Maybe if it takes like 2 or 3 weeks to ship to you, you have it, for a week or so of spooky season. I'm very interested in what the commentary is going to look like because Year of the Witching, it was more about like, it felt like more like a commentary on like Puritanism and Christianity and patriarchy. And so it'll be interesting to have this look where it sounds like it's being more through like a class lens. Yeah, so I'm just excited to see what else Henderson's going to be doing. So next question is biggest disappointment of the year, and this book won by a landslide, and that would be What Are You Doing Here by Lena Dawes. I just complained about this so much in a wrap-up that I did where I had read it. It's written by this music journalist who lives a Black music journalist who lives in Canada. And it's kind of like a mix of her talking about her experience with the genre and also just like general history of Black women making metal. There's like some discussions of punk, but metal's kind of the focus of the book. And I wasn't like a dedicated like metal listener in high school. Like I honestly just kind of would find a few artists that I like, I'd latch onto them. I just like listen to their albums on repeat. And so like there are a few metal songs that I liked, but by and large, I think I was mostly listening to like punk, grunge, and like alternative rock. But I was like, I'd like to get more into it. Like if you're going to recommend me artists or tell me cool facts, I'd like to know more about it. And in general, it just felt like the analysis was very surface level. Like historically speaking, it felt very surface level in terms of looking at why aren't there more Black female artists in metal. It felt very surface level. There's a lot of focus on Black people didn't like me growing up, or Black people didn't like that I liked metal. And like even then the focus was very superficial. Like I felt like there's a lot of like comparing apples to oranges in terms of like the author brings in her experiences, but she's from Canada, and then we'll just like randomly switch to talking about the United States. But then when she talks about like the music scenes for Black people in the US and Black people in Canada, they sound like very, very different in terms of like what genres are popular. And there isn't really an explanation of like, okay, I'm talking about my experience over here and you're talking about your experience over there. Why do I think it's like close enough that I can compare certain things? And then like there just really wasn't a lot of criticism of racism and white supremacy. Like she'd bring up some like pretty egregious stuff that happened, and it was just kind of like minimized or swept under the rug. Um, and in general, I just felt like I was trying to do too much. Like, there's like the memoir aspect, which is what she had wanted it to be. She mentioned that at the end of the book, but then like she was having issues selling it as a memoir, so she felt like it had to bring in more like bigger picture stuff, and it just felt like nothing really got enough focus to make it interesting. It just kind of fell very, very flat for me. Um, yeah, I mean, even if we're like talking about um, why Black people might not like metal, it felt like even the analysis of that was very very superficial. Um, like I remember at one point she brought up like money, like you know, young Black women who wanted to become like want to play metal for a living and their parents are like, "You're not gonna make any money doing that." And, like, not really and just being like, these parents are like, they don't get it, like, um, Black people just aren't risk takers, they're conformists, blah, 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 and, like, not really, like, asking any deeper questions, like, I don't know, like, for example, the some of the people she, interviewed, like, she said that their parents were immigrants, and so, like, for me, a lot of the families I know were, like, you know, there are only 1 or 2 generations removed, a lot of people have, like, financial obligations in another country. Like, there wasn't much interrogation of like, okay, for example, like if you say people are like not supportive of this thing, so it doesn't make you money, are there certain like financial obligations that the populations you're interviewing might have that like white people don't or are less likely to have? Or like there just wasn't really a lot of curiosity around like the people that she was interviewing, it seemed like. So that was disappointing to me. And I'm gonna stop complaining about it because I feel like I gave it way more time than it deserved. Um, hey, Emma Ray, thanks for joining. So, next question is most surprising read of the year, and that would be Early Departures by Justin A. Reynolds. I think this was the biggest surprise for me because I hadn't read this author before. Um, wasn't, and I think like I wasn't really sure it was gonna like stick with me, if that makes sense. Like I picked it up based on one rave review from Written in Melanin. Um, And this is a YA contemporary sci-fi about this Black teenager, Jamal, who his parents died in a car crash. And then he ends up blaming his best friend, Quincy, and he has a falling out with him. And then him and Quincy look like they might reconcile, and then Quincy dies suddenly. And in this timeline, they have research to temporarily bring people back to life and Quincy is chosen to be temporarily brought back to life, and it's about how Jamal, Quincy's family, everyone is dealing with like death and all this sort of stuff. And I'm not a big YA reader. I'm generally not big on the stuff I read is just generally grim. And this is a very optimistic book for a book that's talking about death so much. But I really enjoyed it. I thought that the relationships between the characters were like very strong. I felt like they were the heart of the story. And I was like pleasantly surprised at how much I cared about the story and what was going to happen, even though you kind of already know, you know, what is going to happen at the end of the story. So in terms of the next question, favorite new author, debut or new to you, that would be the author of this one, Justin A. Reynolds. Um, so this was the first year I'd read Jordan and Fuego, but funnily enough, she'd written a short story a few years ago that I had already read, so she wasn't really like new to me. And I say funnily enough because it's like not very common for YA authors to have like short stories out. Like it's something I see a lot more with adult sci-fi and fantasy authors than I do with like their YA counterparts. Um, but Afueka wasn't really new to me this year, and I, if I had to do the script now, I would have said Olivia Stevens just because I'm very partial to authors that I interview. But at the time I scripted up, Justin A. Reynolds. I just finished Early Departures and I automatically was like looking up interviews with him. Was thinking of interview questions if I got the chance to talk to him. I was just like very interested in how he approached these topics in this book. So I'm going to take a look at the comments real quick and see if anyone has anything to say. Oh, moving along. So, next question is newest fictional crush. And pretty much every year I don't have a fictional crush. And every year I try to keep it interesting because I feel like it's a cop-out to not answer the question like this. So I will say Hades from Drag Me Up by R.M. Virtues. This is a romance. It's a retelling of the Hades and Persephone myth. And I think what I like about Hades is that I think he's candid and he puts effort into showing up, and that's something I like right now. I'm not really impressed by people who I'm trying to romantically engage with who are acting aloof, and when like I find myself acting aloof, like with people I'm dating, I'm kind of like, why are you doing that? Like, who are you trying to impress? And if you're doing this because like you're not having fun, then like, what are you even doing in this relationship? Yeah, so I'd say Hades from Drag Me Up. Also this year, I just read a weird amount of like young adult because it's my least favorite like age demographic to be reading, and so like obviously that excludes like a bajillion characters that I've read about. So, next question was newest favorite character, and I actually don't have to queue up the share screen for this one because it's from a book I own. My newest favorite character is going to be Fuchsia from A Spectral Hue by Craig Lawrence Gidney. Fuchsia is the ghost of this story. I won't say too much about her origins because it's kind of like revealed throughout the story, even though I don't necessarily know that it's like a spoiler per se, but it's not something you know from the outset, so I just won't share it. But Fuchsia is a character who has like very enigmatic, very like mixed results on the people she possesses. Like on the one hand, her possession drives people to like financial ruin, to distance themselves from their families sometimes. Some people even died as a result of her possession, but also like her possession is like it makes people create beautiful art. And people like crave like like crave the feelings that she brings when she possesses them. So I like that aspect of her character, and also I like how I don't understand her. Like, so she has these effects on people that are pretty consistent, but how she feels about the people she possesses is like not quite clear. Like, there's some semblance that like maybe she's attached to them, like she might think that she's helping them, but also it seems like she has her own compulsions she needs to act out, and there's like a certain disregard she also has for the people she possesses. So I'm like really drawn to how little I understand her. That's why she's my favorite character in a book I read this year. Lois said, never had a fictional crush. I've definitely had so many fictional crushes. Like as a teenager, even as a kid, well, so many of my characters, so many of my crushes were cartoon characters. So fictional crushes is like very much within my norm. It's just like, especially as an adult, happens far less frequently. And just this year, like I mentioned, I've been kind of checked out emotionally. So it's like, I'm not really like latching on to like any one character in the way I need to develop a fictional crush. Murray says, I'm looking forward to reading A Spectral Hue. I'll keep an eye out on your Insta or your YouTube to see what you think of it, because I thought it was a great book. And I hosted a discussion of it, and people had like a lot of thoughts. People who read it seem to really like it too. So I don't think you'll be disappointed, and I'm interested to hear what you'll think. Next question. Book that made you cry? None. I honestly don't even know if there's a book that made me like super, super sad this year. Like, in the same way, it was a cop-out for me to be like, oh, I don't have crushes for the previous question. I don't want to cop out of this one too. So let me like take a look-see through my Goodreads and see what was the book that made me saddest this year. It's been a while since I've cried at a book. Like I will cry during movies, like Everything Everywhere. I cry multiple times, pretty much every time I've seen it, except the first time I saw it. Um, but for whatever reason with books, it's just like more of a process for that to happen. Whew, that was a quick scroll. Looking through my Goodreads just reinforced I did not do much reading this year. So I don't know if I even read any books that made me sad this year. Um, there's what was it? Servants of Allah by Servants of Allah by Sylviane A. Diop, which is a nonfiction book about Muslims enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade. I will hook up that cover as we speak. Hey Pat, thanks for joining. Um, and I don't know. It's kind of weird because this book was actually an energizing read for me. It's like something I knew so little about. And so it felt good to like learn something and be like, oh, I'm like learning things. Like all this stuff I didn't know, I know now. Um, but I think I was more like, not me not being able to click stuff, right? I feel like I was more like moody when I read this. Like I don't know if I had a moment where I really like sat down and was like, oh man, like um I can't right now, which is like really weird. It's like really not what I was expecting, but also how this book talks about slavery. It's like not necessarily a lot of focus on like the brutality of stuff, even though like you kind of have to discuss that to discuss, how people were using religion to cope, and specifically Muslims were coping and like handling religion and stuff at the time because like, people were being forcibly converted to Christianity. Um, but there's like a lot of focus on how people were resisting that and like living their lives and stuff like that. So I think in general, I didn't feel as sad about this one, but there were parts that were really like, oh wow, this is this is rough. Um and also just like parts that were like it's interesting because every time I saw something I was like, this is rough, it was also like food for thought for something for me to research more. Maybe it's just a coping thing I did where I was like, I didn't think about things too deeply, so I didn't get too sad about it. But I think that was the one that probably made me saddest of anything I'd read this year. Um, it was a very interesting book, Sarah. It was like honestly one of my favorite reads of this year. But yeah, I didn't script up a response for this. And I don't want to do one on the fly, so I'll talk about it in my next wrap up because it's one of the books I read in July. Book that made you happy, especially by Greg Lawrence Kidney, purely for very shallow ego reasons. So part of this book is set in Philly, and I'm not from Philly, but I'm like adjacent to Philly. I live in the area. And so Philly has obviously changed a lot over the years with gentrification and stuff. And especially for this book, I think the parts of the book that are set in Philly, I think were from like the 80s or maybe the 90s. But they were just, Guinea would just like mention streets or like, I think specifically mentioned like incense shops on like South Street. And I was like, oh, I feel like I know like the, like the atmosphere, the vibe that you're describing here. Like that was cool, and like purely from like a pat on the back, like ego boost moment. I mentioned earlier I hosted a discussion of this book, and it went really well. And so it's always gratifying when it's like I pick a book and the discussion is great, and people are like, "Oh, I'm so glad you picked the book." So that was good, and it was nice that this is a book from a smaller publisher. It's published by Word Horde, and Craig Lawrence Guinea isn't necessarily like a hugely popular author. I think he writes really good stuff, but he's not super well known. And so it was nice to have a moment where I was able to like get people to connect with a work that they otherwise might not have read. So that was that. Next question: favorite book to movie adaptation? I don't watch movies like that. I just don't watch movies like that. And I don't think I've seen a book to movie adaptation this year. So I could not answer this question for the life of me. Next question: favorite review that you've done? And similar vein to the question about sequels, I only made a review for The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, so that review wins by default. I mentioned earlier that with the technical issues, doing standalone reviews is going to be difficult. I'm going to have to find some way to make it work because I have a bunch more to do. But in terms of like why I would be proud of the review I did, for reference, I read this like a year ago, like last June, and I like made notes and scripted up a review, but for some reason in June, I just like had this like huge block where I had a few reviews I wanted to get out, and I just haven't gotten any of them out. Something just like kind of stopped me in my tracks. So proud of myself that, you know, it's been a year, but I still made the review. I still made it happen. And also I just felt like it was part of like me growing as a booktuber, and that in general, when I'm sent arcs, you know, I do want to say very positive things. I don't want to like, you know, I guess harsh the release specifically for Black authors. And for this book, and like as you might be able to see, this is a physical arc. That was something that really meant a lot to me when I was first starting out, was like getting physical arcs. And also like this was a book that in reviews I was seeing was getting like pretty universally praised. And there's a part that I was running into that just like wasn't working for me. I felt like I was the only person who was having issues with it. And it's also something that I was like, this could be very touchy because it involves the romance between the main character and their love interest, because there is like a real steep power imbalance. And pretty much everything I was seeing was like praising this romance, saying that the romance was fun and stuff. And I was like, I truthfully could not enjoy the romance because it's so stressful for me. Seeing how much power Luca could have over Terrain if things went poorly. And also like how, I don't know if Terrain was in a place where she could necessarily even like question certain things or look for help if she needed it. And I think I've kind of not said certain things in reviews in years past because I was like, for similar reasons to things I mentioned with this book. And I was kind of like, I'm just gonna say it. And it took me a year to say it, but it got said. So yay for growth. And check the comments real quick. Lois says she saw the Shadow and Villain adaptation. It's just all right. I feel like that's how people feel about a lot of adaptations, honestly. I feel like once you're like introduced to something, you're like, this is the thing. Like this is the standard. And it's very hard for them to like have a life of their own. Like I can't think of a single adaptation where I had read the source material first and then watched the movie and been like, oh, the movie was like miles better. Typically when I like the movie more, it's because the movie was what I was introduced to. Next question is most beautiful book that you bought, and that would be the 1-year anniversary edition of The Black Veins by Aisha Monet. This is like a young adult road trip fantasy, and I bought it pretty specifically because of this cover. There was another edition where the cover is like kind of plain, like I don't know if it really tells you much anything about the book. There's like neon lights and like a lightning bolt and like a brick wall. It's all kind of gray. But like I really love the colors in this cover. I really like that we see all the characters, and specifically like this person here. Trying to make sure it's on screen, is like really cool. Like I love her hair. I love the oranges in her outfit. I love that she rollerblades. So I haven't read this yet. I would like to do it. I would like to do it. I bought it, so I'm gonna read it at some point. But again, not happen this year just because of my priorities at this time. So the artist for this cover is Shazleen Khan, if people want to check him out. So next question is books you need to read by the year's end. And I laugh because almost none of these books will be getting read. So I mentioned earlier that I host discussion for A Spectral Hue, and that's through an online book club. SOULar Powered Afrofuturism Slow Reading Group, and Jerry of Onyx Pages created it. And there's a few other reviewers in leadership who you might know, Nori of Chronicles of Noria, and who's a booktuber, and then a reviewer, Kiki, who who has an Instagram where I believe it's under If This Is Paradise, and she also does like pro reviews. And then Claire, who is not a online reviewer. And so there's a few books coming up for that I will need to read at some point. I have the links in the description box below if you want to join. Those happen over Zoom. And so the links in the description box are to the Facebook event because the group is mostly based on Facebook, but the Zoom links should be in the event. I would just keep in mind that the dates on there might be subject to change because we had like a hiccup with the last one and we haven't fully ironed out everything from that. So next one's going to be Heaviness of Knowing by Charlene G. Brown. This one is probably going to happen September 24th. I think that is the plan as of right now, still being finalized. But this is like a sci-fi book that I read already. It's actually free on Kindle. So you can either read it on your Kindle for free, or I have like a Kindle app on my laptop that I use to read stuff. So I've read it already at this point. I included it in a sci-fi recommendations video. It's about this woman who like can communicate with aliens in her dreams, and they're kind of nudging her to make this like microchip that is basically going to help them take over Earth, but they're not telling her that that's why they're telling her how to make this microchip. They're just like, we just want to help you with your job. We just want what's best for you. So that's one of the reads. And then the next read is a short story collection called Tender by Sophia Samatar. I don't know a thing about this collection. I am intrigued by this cover. Like, I wonder what it's of. Like, is this like ants on some sort of like very elaborate anthill? Is this like tripe or like honeycomb? Like, what is it? I don't know. But that's the second one. This is Kiki is going to be hosting this discussion. She Swears by Sophia Samatar. So I'm excited to see what we'll talk about with that one. I'm just seeing everybody's comments. Loved Heaviness of Knowing. They're just like, we're just totally here for you, bestie. I probably can't wink right. Was not a skill I ever picked up, but like, yeah. It was like, it's like such a mess. The lies that they tell to this main character. And it just gets like weirder and weirder as the story goes. Like, especially like the people on Earth, as they find out about the plot and like what they do to get involved. It's kind of like, what is going on here? Like, who is telling the truth? Like, I don't trust a single person who is talking in this book. So we'll see what happens. That's the first in a series. I think it's a trilogy. Not entirely sure, but I know there's at least a sequel. And so our last read of the year will be Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. This is a YA fantasy that I'm sure everyone has heard about at this point. It's about this mermaid whose job is supposed to be like leading like the drowned souls to the realm of the dead. And then she meets a boy and she lets him live, and that causes issues for her. And that's about all I know. But generally heard good things. So that'll be interesting. Sarah says, OMG, Sophia Samatar's half Somali. I know nothing about this author, so thanks for the tidbit. Yeah, that's a cool thing about getting like, I don't know, doing book clubs is when people pick stuff for you, because it's like a good way to read stuff you wouldn't normally read. So I have a niche and I like to stick to my niche. So it's good for me to get out of my comfort zone every once in a while. And so I made a reading goal in my New Year's book tag video that I was going to read some books as well, like Of One Blood by Pauline Hopkins, which is like one of those like books that like predates genre labels. So it's like kind of like one of those like really early horror or sci-fi books, which is part of why I'm dragging my feet on it, honestly, because like it's going to be important for me to read. It's also like not always my jam. Then there's Brothers Jetstream Leviathan by Zigzag Claiborne, which is like a sci-fi novella. It's supposed to be like trippy, kind of like funny and irreverent. So it seems like it'd be like a good change of pace for me because the things I read are generally kind of like serious and grim. And then there's this book that I've had for a long time. Well, 1 or 2 years. Forest of a Thousand Demons by Dio Fagunwa. This is not as old as Of One Blood, but this is kind of like one of those older fantasy books that was written, and hopefully it will jog my memory about what language. But first novel to be written in Yoruba, so very significant book, published in 1939, and also I think pretty influential. So I want to read this, and it was funny because I asked for this for a Christmas present from my mom, and I forget what it was. I feel like it was like it was either this or another one, but like 1 or 2 months after Christmas, in like February, she's like, "Oh, hey, have you read those books I got you yet?" And I was like, "Mom, come on now." We both know the answer to that. At least I know the answer to that. No. It'll be such a long time between when I buy a book and when I read it. Looking at the comments real quick. Would love to see more Somali MCs. I would as well. I'm trying to remember because I know in Jerry of Onyx pages read some book that had a Somali main character, and I don't know if it got a whole lot of attention from BookTube, so you might not have heard of it. I'll see if I can find it. Pat says, very intriguing, interesting. Skin of the Sea second book is out in September. Soul of the Deep pre-ordered mine. It was interesting because I don't think it was announced it was part of a series when it first dropped. And then they're like, there's a sequel earlier in this year. So yeah, I haven't started the series at all, but I am intrigued. It says, I have to start the first one. Same boat. Covers are beautiful. I'm liking the cover art as well. The title. That was Forest of a Thousand Demons by D.O. Fagunwa. Yeah, when my mom gives me gifts, she likes to know that they're being used, and it's kind of like it's being used as decoration on my bookshelf. Like at least 20 other books that I bought myself. And so I think there's a few. Oh, the last book. No, there's 2 other books I said I was going to read in my New Year's book tag that will not get read this year. But hey, it's good to make goals. Am I right? Goals that I know I'm not going to keep. One of them was A History of Nigeria by Toyin Falola. Just because I read a lot of books from Nigerian authors, not even a lot, but like if I'm reading books set outside the US, it's typically by Nigerian authors, and I'm like, wow, I know like next to nothing about Nigeria. I should probably change that. So I wanted to read this, and then also this one, which is called The Things That Fly in the Night, Female Vampires in Literature of the Circum-Caribbean and African Diaspora, because I was recommended this on Twitter from like it was like some literary journal that publishes articles about vampires. And I looked at it, I was like, that's real cool. I like the summary. I like this cover. I really like good literary criticism, like well-written stuff. So I'm hoping to really enjoy this one. But yeah, me and my attention span. I mean, I could have read at one point. I was kind of on a nonfiction binge at one point, but I feel like I read some books that just like crushed that streak I had. And then lastly, I might reread The City We Became this year because for those who don't know, the sequel drops in, I think it's in November. I think it's the City We Make or The World We Make comes out. And so I'd hosted the Inheritance Trilogy read-along with a bunch of people. And one of them had been like, the new book is coming out by N.K. Jemisin. We should read the first one together. So if that happens, I will reread it. I will make an extra effort for the buddy read to reread that one, if said buddy read happens. And I'm just going to take a quick break and look for that title before I forget. I don't want to leave you hanging too long. And it's back, so I didn't even know what to Google to look it up, so I'm just kinda scrolling through in Jerry's, videos really quick. Gonna mute myself real fast. I will throw it in the comments. The book that I heard had a Somali, MC was Home Is Not a Country by Sophia Ohila. I'm also trying to read stuff on this screen with, like, grainy pictures, so that's not helping. But I will put it in the comments, for Lois or anyone else who's interested. Emma Ray says, "If that happens, gonna listen to The City We Became instead of physically reading it." I I'm, like, allergic to audiobooks or something. Like, I can do romance, but I don't I and it's annoying because 'cause I've heard great things about the audiobook for City We Became, but, like, I tried to do one for another fantasy book by I think it was the same narrator. No, it wasn't the same narrator, but it's by, like, a highly lauded narrator, and I was just like, "I can't." I don't know. I don't even know what it is. I think I'm just being contrary. My brain's like, "You would really love this thing, so I'm just gonna stop you, just for funsies." Um, so that was the tag, and then just for, like, accountability's sake, I'm going to revisit my goals from the New Year's book tag. If you got places to be, you don't really need to stick around for it because, like, um, too long, don't read. The goals aren't being met, and they likely won't be met because it's August and the year is pretty much over as far as I'm concerned. Like, we can, like, get ready for Halloween and winter, Halloween and Christmas. Like, reading is not happening for the rest of the year, so I'm just going to revisit these because why not? It's in the script. So, how many books are you planning to read? I do not have a book amount. That's not really how I like to read. Like, unless there's like like a pan pizza at the end of the at the end of the tunnel, or like some external organization offering me a reward, I usually don't have like a page count or a book count that I'm trying to reach when I read. And that works out great for me because this year my reading has been like pretty light, especially for stuff within my channel's focus, sci-fi and fantasy by Black authors or writing by Black authors in general. Like, I was looking at my Goodreads, and at the time that I had scripted up this video, I'd only read 12 books by Black authors. It's probably like maybe 15 now, which is maybe like half of what I'd read in like a typical year by this time. Um, I have been reading like a little bit more outside of that. Like, I've been reading more fantasy by East Asian authors specifically, like I've read some books by like Chinese authors, Korean authors, mostly like who are like Chinese American, Korean American authors. Um been reading like I haven't been reading enough Southeast Asian literature to say Southeast Asian. So I've been reading like a little bit more like writing by Vietnamese American authors, like one translated work from Vietnam. And that's just kind of been more, I think, of what I've been doing. Like, I think that accounts for some of why I haven't read a lot for my channel. It's just been reading outside my focus, which has been kind of nice just because it's like stuff where I don't feel like I need to talk about it, you know? It's like if I want to reach out to someone and like message them, I can, but I don't feel like I need to like, make something about it for like other people to watch. Like, you can just be like, oh, I read it. I don't have to think too deeply about it if I don't want to, because I don't need to explain my opinions on it to other people. Um, so that's been nice. Next one was, so I had some goals about genres I wanted to read more of. I wanted to read more short stories, and specifically magazines I don't typically read, and I unfortunately don't think I've read a single short story this year, which is, like, wild for me because I usually am reading at least, like, 2 a month, I feel like. So I made a spreadsheet to track those separately because Goodreads does not like short stories. So, like, maybe some weekend I will, like, I have to crochet some stuff that I said I was gonna do. It's like maybe some weekend I'll, like, queue up, the audio versions of these short stories because I think a lot of the publications I'm trying to read do have audio components to them, so maybe I'll work some in that way, or maybe I'll try to get into audiobooks that way because I kinda gave up on crocheting for a little bit and now I'm back, and maybe, like, the audiobook would be a good backdrop to me crocheting. I want to read more classic sci-fi and fantasy, like work that predated genre labels, have not read a single one of those this year. I did make some headway on the, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, and erotica. I read Mistletoe by Kimberly Lemming, which was fun. I was like, "Yeah, I feel like I'm on the right track trying to find more fantasy romance because like, I could see myself getting into this more." Um, Lemming has more of, like, a humorous approach to the genre, like, the world building isn't really, like, the focus, things are more, like, silly, like, for laughs, and that was fun, but I think I also wanted, like, more, like, cohesion from, like, the world and, like, the story stuff, so I think I'm still, like, on the hunt for, like, the romance, fantasy romance of my dreams. Um, in terms of erotica, I did try Every Dark Desire by Fiona Zed. Let me cue that up. People might be interested. Oh, oops. So this was Mistletoe. This was the cover here. I really like this cover. I think it's really cute. And believe it or not, the sword is a very important character, the sword in the background. And then the other one that I was just talking about, the erotica, is Every Dark Desire by Fiona Zed. And I DNF'd it. I honestly didn't even get into the into the erotica parts. Because I just realized it wasn't what I was looking for. This one is set in Jamaica, and really, like, what is, like, getting me really excited to read romance and erotica is finding, like, pairings where it's, like, 2 Black women, and I was going into this one where I was like, I wasn't sure what the pairing was gonna be, like, I know the main character is Black, but I didn't know about the love interest, and there was, like, this whole roller coaster where I was like, "Oh, the love interest might actually be Black," and I was like, "Oh, wait, I don't think she's endgame, though." I think the endgame is, like, this white woman, and so I kind of was like, "I don't think this is gonna be what I'm looking for at this time, so I'm just gonna put it down." Um, like, am I gonna revisit it at some point? I don't think so. The writing was fine, the writing was good. I think it could go some, like, very interesting places because I think part of vampirism in this story is that, like, you just kind of run out of, like, Fs to give, honestly, like like, you get turned into a vampire and you kinda lose, like, a lot of inhibitions, it's just kind of part of the process, so, like, there's gonna be, I'm sure, ample setup for sexual shenanigans. It's funny in terms of the main character because the main character has been very mild-mannered as a human, and then she gets turned into a vampire, and she's, like, cursing people out, she's, like has no patience for much anything. Um so, like, it could be fun to reread, but I think at the time, I was just, like, really, really hoping that the love interest would be Black, and I was, like, just sad that that didn't happen, especially because I feel like in film and TV especially, I'll see people hyping up stuff where it's like, "Oh, man, you know, Black lesbians, Black lesbians." I'm like, "Ooh, let me see." Like, specifically in, like, the sci-fi fantasy realm, and then I'll take a watch, and it's like the love interest is pretty much always white. Um, and I I wanna see something different at this point, like, even if it was interracial with another person of color, I think I would be more inclined to, like, try stuff, like, outside of my niche if it was something like that. Because erotica is kinda outside my niche, honestly. Like, I'm still finding the stuff that I like. Like, it's very easy for me to, like, read a few pages of an erotica and be like, "This isn't my thing, like, I don't need to be here. Let me stick to the sci-fi fantasy I'm used to." Um, so there's that as well. So if people have recommendations, like by all means, please let me know. Um, I'm gonna read the comments real quick. Um, enjoyed City We Became via the audiobook, the atmosphere, and the feel of the book. I heard great things about this one. I think it was Noria from Chronicles of Noria because we had Buddy write it like a few years ago, and she mentioned that the audio narration was like fantastic, especially for like some of the like eerie parts. And so it's just like really annoying to me that like my brain just like rejects audiobooks. It's like the words go in the one ear and they don't even like just like pass out the other. They just go like boop. Like I don't process a single thing that I hear, and I don't know why. Um, oh, Pat is vouching for Home is Not a Country. I know and Jerry really liked it. I hadn't been planning on reading it because it was, I think, a story in prose. Not most stuff I read is in prose, story in verse, and I was also, I also just like wasn't sure because I thought it was like more like YA. And I feel like that I'm just increasingly conscious of like how I'm like too old for a lot of the stuff for teens that I read. Um, but no, if this many people are vouching for it, it's something new. I should give it a read. I have heard of Ancient Ancient. I have not read it, unfortunately. It is one I'd like to read at one point, but I read like one short story by that author in, I think it was a Dark Matter anthology. And it was like this really weird mix of like the surreal and like the erotic. And it was like just so strange. Like I don't even remember like the whole point of the story. I just remember it ended with like someone like, I'm actually not even gonna say how it ends. But like really like the ending was like nasty and bizarre, also like freeing. For some reason is how I remember how I felt when it ended. So like I really wanted to read more of her stuff, but like I haven't. Um, so I would like to read that at some point. And let's see, what was else on my goals list? So I had some non-book related goals. I was going to vacuum my room, which I thought was going to require a lot of cleaning and organization, but I am nothing if not ingenious when it comes to being lazy. So I've just been kind of like selectively moving things around so I can just get the hand vacuum in there and clean up like that. And at some point that's just not going to cut it anymore. I'm going to have to actually clean in there. I'm really weird about hoarding papers. Like I have so much like junk mail in my room, like from my banks, like, oh, hey, we sent you this e-notice. Let us completely invalidate the purpose of sending you an electronic notice by sending you a physical copy as well. And I'm just like weird about throwing stuff like that out. So I just need to like trash a whole lot of papers, be honest with myself that I'm not going to scan or read a lot of these papers and just get rid of them. My next goal was to play Drunken Dreams of the Past on my little ocarina, my flute. And that song is the theme song for one of my favorite, it's really like, I've only seen two, what are they called? I think it's Donghua is the animation from China, and it is my favorite of the two I've seen. Hope to watch more so I can like say that and it's more impressive. Um, but I really love the theme song, and I got the sheet music. I've practiced it a little bit, but it definitely needs more work. Um, so small itty bitty steps. And then my last one, I wanted to learn how to rollerblade backwards, and like I've really been slacking on this one. Like I think it's been a month since I've skated. I mostly skate outside, and especially with the summer, like I wear a lot of gear, so like I don't just like shred my skin anytime I fall. And it gets hot, so I've been like using that as an excuse for months. I was trying to get lessons at one point, but like basically all the lessons in my area don't run in the summer, and like I'm very confused as to why that is. 'Cause it seems like summer's prime time, right? Like kids are out of school, they're looking for something to do, just like shove them into skate camp. So it's disappointing that they don't start back up until fall, but that's the state of things. I could go to a rink. I tried going to a rink a few times, but like adult hours only are like really late at night. They're at like 11 at night, which is like I don't want to be up skating at like 11 at night. I got other things to do at 11 at night on a weekend. And like weekends during the day can just be crowded, like crowded with kids, very loud. Like I might be better at it now. It's like when I had initially gone to the rink, I had been working from home, so there's just like a lot of like people being around, not everyone's masked, stuff that I just like wasn't used to. But I started a different job and I'm in person every day. I'm taking public transit every day. So like some of just like the overwhelm from like the noise stuff might be a little better. But also at these kids skates, there's just like all kids everywhere. And like I'm not super agile on my skates yet. So I'm just like terrified that I'm gonna like run over some kid who weighs like half as much as me and I'm gonna feel terrible because like there's no reason. Like there's no reason. Um, so a lot of excuses is what I'm giving you as to why I haven't been rollerblading practicing, why I haven't been practicing rollerblading. And I just need to stop making those excuses. Also, 'cause it's like my main form of exercise, so I need to do that again. Um, but I have made some progress in figuring out why my backwards rollerblading isn't great. Like I can kind of move backwards, on the skates, but it's not really like skating per se. And it's because I have one foot that I'm very confident in balancing on, and then one foot that I'm not confident on balancing on. So I need to work on balance stuff. And I really have no excuse to not do balance stuff because that's all stuff I can do indoors, inside my house. So maybe that'll be my modified skating goals to do some amount of balance practice on like my left foot every day. Books I've had forever and I still need to read. I've made zero progress on reading. So I've read like at least 4 books that I own, but 2 of the ones were ones I bought and immediately read, and then 2 were ones I'd owned less than a year. Like there's some books I've had at least 8 years that I have not touched or picked up. And I think at some point I just might need to let go of the fact that I'm never going to read them and just donate them. And then last one was like a word that you're hoping the year will be. And I had said my word was going to be impactful. I was trying to make my channel more impactful for me, like make just like making sure that I'm having fun with it, that I'm feeling fulfilled by it, impactful for the people I collaborate with and platform, and impactful for viewers. And I have made some headway in terms of just like making it easier for me to promote things is that I've been doing a lot of like playlists and displaying them on my channel. And specifically, there are always months that roll around on Twitter, you know, Black History Month's the same month every year. Pride's the same month every year. Black Women's History Month, same month every year. And so just putting together videos I have that are relevant to that in a playlist so I can just thread them up really easily every year and get new eyes on my content because I stand by the stuff I made in those videos. It's quality stuff. Yeah, so I should just promote it more. And I'm hoping that that will make it easier for me to do that. And yeah, I think I'm kind of at the limits of what I'm going to do in terms of like playing with ways to make the channel more fulfilling for me. Cause like, aside from the fact that it hasn't been a focus, there's also just been like tech issues where I was like trying to change streaming places and then iMovie's giving me grief and just like steps on steps on steps, even just like film stuff. I think my content's going to be fairly rote for the rest of the year. And I think it just is what it is. I'm just going to have to give myself grace and permission to be like, them's the breaks. So yes, that was my very extended video doing the mid-year book freakout tag and then checking back in on my progress on the goals I made at my New Year's book tag. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out and watching and talking with me. Had a great conversation with you all today. I hope you have a good weekend and a good rest of your day. Rest up, stay safe, and take care. Goodbye, everybody.